This episode of Product Talk has been made possible by mParticle. mParticle is the leading customer data platform for multi-channel consumer brands. Sophisticated product managers, engineers, data scientists, and marketers at companies like NBC Universal, Spotify, and Airbnb use mParticle to integrate and orchestrate their entire growth stack and drive product and business decisions. Learn how you can turn your customer data into a growth asset by visiting mparticle.com/PTC.
Welcome to Products That Count, one of the largest networks of product managers in the world. Over 200,000 product managers committed to building great products join to network, learn, and get inspired by leaders such as Netflix Product VP, Coinbase CPO, and Box CPO. They attend local speaker series, listen to podcasts, connect at invite-only salon, and much more. You can get our newsletter and find out about our events and programs on our website, productsthatcount.com. I'm S.C. Moadi, the founder of Products That Count, managing partner of Mighty Capital, and best-selling author of Mobilized, an insider's guide to the business and future of connected technology. Now let's get this program going.
Hi everyone, this is Samantha Scott, your host for this episode of Product Talk. I've worked as a product manager in e-commerce, and I'm currently working at a health tech startup in New York City. Today, I'll interview a product leader to share their story and hard-earned wisdom. Let's get started. Jessica, welcome to our podcast. Thank you so much for coming to speak with us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Can you start by introducing yourself and telling us about the path that led you to VP of Product at Rowe?
Sure. So I'm Jess Prager, currently VP of Product at Rowe. I've been with Rowe for just over 2.5 years. And when I started with Rowe, we were less than 10 people in a room and have now grown to over 250 team members today. So very rapid growth in a short amount of time. And as far as the path that brought me to Rowe, the foundation of my career was really in strategy and consumer-focused businesses. So PepsiCo, Warby Parker, ClassPass, and really got into product management after kind of beginning more in that strategy and business development industry, and then joined Rowe without healthcare experience, but really wanting to help build a company from the ground up.
Very exciting. And I'm sure what Rowe looked like then is different than what it looks like now. So would love to hear what really excited you about that opportunity originally and what keeps you excited today.
Sure. So when I was first getting to know Rowe and getting to know the founders, one of the things that I was really looking for was an opportunity to help build a business and a product from the ground up. And so as I was meeting the team, some things really stood out to me that made me really excited about the opportunity. First and foremost was the incredible founding team. The founders are truly special. They're smart, visionary, strategic, and incredible executors. But at the same time, there's a strong sense of humility and an openness and willingness to engage in debate. They actively want to hear that they're wrong and why. And I think that really sets just an incredible foundation for the beginning of a company. And really that tone from the top continues as the company grows. Secondly, the mission around wanting to increase access to healthcare and also break down barriers where people in the past may have not sought care for conditions or needs that they have. And really empower them to take control of their health. That was something that I was really motivated by and excited by. And likewise with that, with telemedicine just really beginning, there's a huge opportunity as far as what we could build and where the direction the market was going. So all of that really lined up. And I think, the last thing that, in retrospect, I think it was something that definitely drove me to Rowe, but I don't know that I realized how important it was until after I joined, was just the energy that I got from working with that team. When the team is that small, your ability to click with them and to, gel and get each other and build on top of each other's ideas really quickly is crucial. And I think that's something that I definitely felt, that energy. And then once I was there, it really made sense why that was such an important element of the equation.
That makes sense. And for listeners who maybe aren't familiar with Rowe yet, could you also tell us a bit more about the company and your mission and a bit more about the products that you are building?
Sure. So we were founded in 2017. Ro is a patient-driven telehealth company that really puts patients in control of their health. And our mission, what we are building towards, is becoming a patient's first call for all of their healthcare needs so that we have that trust with them where they really turn to us to figure out what is next when certain things come up with their health or even just proactively managing their health. And so what that means is that, Ro is really the company and the platform behind powering 3 digital health clinics. So there's Roman for men's health, Rory for women's health, and Zero for fighting smoking addiction, as well as Ro Pharmacy, which is a simple and affordable online pharmacy where we have over 500 generic medications that are priced at a very affordable rate of $5 per month. And so, what does that really mean, and what are the ways that we've brought that all together? So Ro has an integrated nationwide network of physicians and pharmacies that provide that end-to-end healthcare experience from an online treatment, online doctor's visit to the actual delivery of medication and ongoing care. And so what that means as far as product surface areas, we actually have a very, very broad surface area that our products touch. So we have built in-house essentially all of the software that connects this end-to-end experience. So what that means in practice is that everything from the patient-facing experience, from the online doctor's visit to their account where they can manage their prescriptions, message their doctor, and also engage and seek out treatment for other healthcare conditions. That's one portion. Then there is the EMR, the electronic medical record that we built, which is essentially where our providers log in and review patient healthcare data, communicate back and forth with the patient, and actually make treatment decisions, be it writing an electronic prescription, providing counseling, et cetera. And then really the third area is around the pharmacy fulfillment. So we operate our own pharmacies, and the software that powers that fulfillment and then also the operations tooling is another area of the product that our team owns. And so, just to give a sense of kind of how the company has evolved and how things have evolved over time, we started with ED. That was the first condition that we treated end to end. And from there, we expanded our clinical offering to the 3 digital health clinics that I mentioned. So we started with just Roman and then grew from there. Now we are treating nearly 20 conditions, including sexual health conditions, weight loss, dermatology, allergies, and more. And in fewer than 3 years, what we're really excited about is that Ro has facilitated more than 5 million digital healthcare visits for patients in nearly every county in the United States, including those that are primary care deserts where there's actually a shortage of physicians. So that's something around, access that we are tremendously excited to continue pushing on.
Very exciting. And why did you all decide when extending the product line to set up separate health marketplace products versus extending the product that you'd already created for men's health?
Yeah, it's a really great question and something that we actually talked a lot about in the early days. The reason why we went the approach of, expanding Roman, but then also creating these other 2 digital health clinics is that we wanted the ability to really speak to our patients and meet them where they are with the needs that they care about right now. And that's something that we can definitely dig into more, but we've really taken a very targeted approach of recognizing the healthcare needs and conditions that are motivating patients to seek treatment and to actually have conversations about their health. And in order to do that, we found actually having very targeted brands and things that spoke to those immediate needs that patients cared about was a really effective way for them to be able to bridge that gap between being interested in seeking treatment and actually following through with it. And for the majority of our patients, Ro, one of our digital clinics through Ro, is actually their first interaction with telemedicine. And so we're really bridging that gap and bringing them into the digital healthcare ecosystem.
And you mentioned that you're really focusing on the end-to-end customer experience, so doctor visit through prescription delivery. And by really being exposed to that whole journey, I expect there's a lot of pretty unique opportunities to improve the customer experience because sometimes that handoff can feel disjointed. I'd love to hear more about how Ro is using technology to improve that journey.
Absolutely. I think that you absolutely hit the nail on the head there of why this is so powerful. If you think about the experience that a patient has today navigating the traditional healthcare system, on average, it takes 29 days to make an appointment. And that actually usually ends up lasting around 12 minutes once the patient actually gets into the doctor's office. And most of the physician's time is spent on administrative tasks required for insurance billing. So there's so much inefficiency and mismatch of, high value activities versus low value activities. And then, once they actually get a prescription or get treatment, patients on average have to wait 45 minutes at a retail pharmacy to pick up their medication. And, that's not only expensive, it's inefficient. And the time and cost barriers alone are enough to keep many from going to the doctor at all. And so, for us, as we think about, to your point, how does technology bring together this end-to-end solution that really improves, the experience for patients and lowers the barriers to access. For us, that means really bringing it together with building a telemedicine system that includes an integrated nationwide physician network and a nationwide pharmacy network so that we actually can make sure that all of those experiences are coming together and speaking to one another, whereas in reality, they're disjointed. So there's two examples that really stand out to me as far as, ways in which our product is really meeting that goal for our patients. So the first one is around adjusting a patient's medication to find the most effective course of treatment. If you think about what that would mean for a patient in a traditional sense, so let's say they finally get in to see a doctor, they talk about a healthcare need, there's an initial course of treatment that's recommended. And so the patient starts on that journey, right? They go, they get their prescription, they start taking the medication. And then there's, this point of checking in to see how are things going? Is the medication actually helping? Is it getting you to where you'd expect to be? Do we need to actually adjust the dosage or the medication itself to find the most effective course of treatment? Every time that iteration happens, the patient kind of starts at square zero of next appointment, go in, let's check, let's talk, then let's try something else. And it's that disjointed nature of the experience just compounds on itself. Mm-hmm. Whereas at Row, what we've been able to do is proactively build in those check-in touch points with the patients, between the patient and the provider, have them have those conversations, see how things are working. And if adjustments need to be made, it can be done real time. The physician will write a new prescription to our pharmacy, cancel the existing, and order will go out that same day. And it really just closes that loop of finding the most effective treatment by being proactive and really lowering the barrier to having those conversations. Our patients have access to their care team via messaging in their account 24/7. So that's whether or not they're thinking about this at 10 p.m., 6 a.m., or noon, they can kick off that conversation with the physician. And so that's really powerful. And I think, one thing that the other example that I was thinking of was around the prescription renewal process, where, today, if you're trying to get a renewal for your prescription at the year point, depending on the provider that you're working with, there may need to be an in-person, conversation just to check some boxes and see if anything has changed with your health. And then that kicks off, the next round of treatment. For us, because we do have everything so integrated, our physicians are aware as soon as that last refill goes out the door at the pharmacy, and we proactively follow up with patients to check in with their provider and actually are really targeted about what information do we know about you from before around your healthcare condition? What are the key things that we really want to understand about what maybe has changed? And then dig into that and make sure that those interactions are really efficient, but also really high quality, because we make sure that all the important relevant information is systematically tackled. And then that can kick off a new prescription, if relevant, to go out the door again immediately when it makes sense. So I think, that's one thing that has really allowed us to stitch together what in the past has been, a really disjointed patient experience. And one thing that I think, this speaks also to what we were talking about a little bit on the brand side and, leveraging more than one digital clinic to be able to really speak to patients directly. One thing that is unique about Row's approach to telemedicine is really taking a jobs to be done approach for healthcare. So one of our, most powerful and unique insights was taking this jobs to be done philosophy and really applying it to healthcare and what patients are, what really motivated to solve and why they would come to a practitioner and address something over telemedicine. So if you think about a lot of other platforms, it's really a bit phrased as a one size fits all of the right care when you need it most, get care wherever you are. And, for a lot of patients that haven't engaged with telemedicine before, that's a bit like a restaurant saying, come here when you're hungry, we serve food. Patients don't know when or how to use these services. And so it's not just about these capabilities that we've built, it's about positioning those capabilities behind a specific patient-focused use case, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And hearing your examples too is making me think about how not only will this make the customer experience better, but also make it easier for doctors to take care of their patients.
Absolutely. I mean, with the way that we really see our software on the provider side is one, allowing our providers to operate at the top of their license. So, like we mentioned, you talk about physician burnout and hear their concerns with the existing system. They spend so much of their time documenting things for billing purposes. They're not high value touch points. And we really want to empower them to spend their time on those touch points that matter with patients. And let's take care of the rest in the background. Let's find a way to really streamline that process for them and allow them to operate at the top of their license, and also give them superpowers. If we can structure all the health data coming in, proactively flag things that we know based on the protocol of treatment for certain conditions are risk factors, or green flags as far as this patient could be a great candidate for treatment. Let's make that easily accessible to them and really make that easy for them to see.
And I also was curious to hear more about how COVID-19 has affected your product adoption and usage. Have you had to adjust your product strategy at all in response to the pandemic?
Yeah, it's a great question. So the short answer is yes. And I think, there's a few ways in which we did that. There's first us being proactive, and then also us being thoughtful about where to pull back and where to pause and actually watch the patient's reaction, the market reaction to COVID. So on the proactive front, at the onset of the pandemic, public officials started to really encourage the use of telehealth. And in March, Ro, through some very fast iteration, we actually were the first telehealth company to launch a free nationwide COVID-19 online assessment and consultation, where we took the guidelines from the CDC, the WHO, and built this COVID-19 screening assessment. Mm-hmm. And then actually were able to triage patients. We triaged patients in every state, including Washington, D.C., and actually partnered with more than 70 companies and organizations, including Uber and Postmates, to make sure that these COVID-19 assessments were available to their employees so that they could actually get from a healthcare provider understanding their risks and understanding, if they were potentially at risk for actually having contracted COVID-19 based on their symptoms, based on current guidelines, what the actual next steps were with regard to reporting it to the state, getting tested, social quarantining, et cetera. And so really making that accessible to everyone in a time when there was, really rampant fear and uncertainty was something that we prioritized heavily. Taking a step back and pausing and being, aware and creating the space to see how the market would respond. On that side of our shift in strategy, although telemedicine and telehealth was very well poised to help in the outbreak of COVID-19 and really provide access to healthcare, what we didn't know is, how would patients feel about seeking healthcare for conditions that were outside the critical path of knowing that they didn't have COVID-19 mm-hmm. and just, taking care of the baseline of their health to make sure, just monitoring what's going on in the world. A lot of people, with unemployment, we really weren't sure what that was going to mean. And so what we did is we actually paused some rollouts of new conditions, new healthcare conditions, because we weren't sure that it was going to be the right time in the market to actually have those conversations with patients. And would that be something that they even wanted to engage with? So what we did is we paused on some items, and then we looked really closely at the data for our existing conditions and this existing touch points with patients to see, is there still appetite? Are they engaging in these conditions? Is this something that we would actually be bringing them value in this time in their lives versus is it actually probably going to be, falling on deaf ears? We probably should not move forward with these things at this time. And really what we learned, with us, monitoring the data extremely closely was that there was a surge in demand for a lot of these healthcare conditions where they were outside the critical path of, maintaining baseline health, because a lot of our population was stuck at home in front of their computers and wanting to take, proactive steps in their health in ways that they could, given the realities of, quarantine and social distancing. And so that really gave us the confidence to put our original plans back on track and continuing to launch support for new conditions, et cetera. And from there, we really have just seen adoption continue to spike and the demand continue to increase. Very interesting.
And you mentioned how in general, telemedicine adoption has increased as a result of the pandemic. Would love to hear from you if you think after we hopefully move past the pandemic, if you think telemedicine adoption will continue to rise and what you see as the long-term future or where we're going with telemedicine.
Absolutely. I 100% think that it will continue. Really, what the pandemic has done for telemedicine is pulling forward and accelerating a trend that was already in motion. If you look back early 2000s, online shopping, it was a trend that, slowly crept up over time. And, we were really seeing the same thing with healthcare. And I think this has just pulled forward that curve and steepened the curve. So I do think it absolutely is here to stay, especially now that patients that really were hesitant to exercise that option have had to out of necessity, as many doctors' offices have shut down outside of telemedicine appointments. And so they've seen the benefits. And I really think that expectation for convenience and access, once that's been kind of something that you've had access to, it's not something that you want to give up. So I really do believe that this trend will continue. And if anything, what I think will be very interesting to watch is that I think that consumer and patient expectations around what types of conditions and what type of medical care can be delivered via telemedicine will continue to evolve as well. We're seeing people come out in the market with approaches to physical therapy via telemedicine, all these things that traditionally one might think that doesn't make any sense to do remotely. We're actually seeing that stuff start to come to market. And so I think that will be something really interesting to watch going forward.
Could you share an example of something that previously folks didn't go to telemedicine for, but now you're seeing change in behavior on?
Yeah, for sure. I think that mental health is one thing that we're seeing accelerate. So that's something that, the Talkspaces of the world, it's been available for a long time. But what we're seeing now is that just the sheer number of people that are coming to telemedicine platforms for mental health services, especially in the time of the pandemic, where a lot of those conditions are exacerbated given the stress of the situation and social isolation. So we've seen that has in the industry accelerated a lot. And then as far as, other types of care, like I mentioned, I think physical therapy is a really interesting one where there's a lot that can be done remotely. And we're seeing, startups focus on that specifically. And I think that's something that, in the past you would never assume is something that could be done remotely and need to go to an actual practitioner in a physical office. But I think what we're seeing is that we're really stretching kind of the imagination and really figuring out, okay, what elements of that, yes, would need to be done in person, but there's so much value that can be delivered via remote care in a lot of these areas where before I think just people weren't really as willing or open to considering that.
And one of the things I love to ask is what you think is the number one thing product needs to get right at Ro over the next year or so to really succeed in the way that you hope to. And I expect, given that prioritization is even more challenging, given how many products that your team is building and supporting.
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny you say prioritization because I actually do think that the number one thing that my team needs to get right is prioritization. Mm-hmm. And that is because we operate in a field with limitless opportunities. We have a very ambitious vision at Ro to become a patient's first call and a provider's first choice. And it really comes down to what goals and outcomes are we going to prioritize and in what order. And so, when you really think about what that means within a given domain, it's balancing investments for the near-term impact and longer-term bets and really driving transparency and collaboration. So working cross-functionally to ensure that there's alignment with either the squad or the group's priorities with the broader cross-functional stakeholders and making sure that trade-offs are made crystal clear and explicit. Because in reality, because there are so many things that we could do, the most important thing we can do is what we're not going to do and be really clear about what we are prioritizing and make sure that everyone's aligned on that and specifically aligned on the goal and the outcome that we're seeking to achieve, because that is how we're going to be able to continue to stay laser focused on the highest impact things for, the next 6 months, the next year and beyond.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And with infinite time, we expect we could make perfect prioritization decisions, but obviously we're trying to move faster than that. Do you have any frameworks or practices that you use on your team to help ensure smart prioritization while continuing to move fast?
Yeah, for sure. It does depend a little bit on the types of problems and goals that the different product teams are focused on. So For example, our product growth team that is, focused much more on driving growth metrics, et cetera. It's really around looking at, given the metrics and the goals that the team is trying to achieve, what are the different levers that they believe and have hypotheses around could move those metrics? And what are the levels of confidence that you have for each of those weighted with what are the potential for impact? So is it a high impact thing, but you actually only have low confidence in it? Is it a medium impact thing that you have high confidence in? And agreeing on how we would stack rank those given those inputs. Whereas for other teams, and I think this actually is true for all, but is something that I think other teams have to lean more heavily on, is looking at the time horizon for bets that you want to make. So being really clear around what are we doing for this near-term impact, and then what are we doing to actually unlock future bets within this goal area. And so, to really drive that and to make sure that prioritization decisions are as perfect as they can be. They're by definition imperfect, but I think that really what it comes down to is making sure that from the top level of the company, we're really, really clear. And when it's not clear, forcing that clarity on what are the most important things and why. So what are the stack ranked priorities for the company of what we're trying to achieve? Of course, we will try to achieve them in parallel, but if we had to force rank them, what would they be? And what would we absolutely not let slip? And then really from there, that allows me and my team to take a portfolio approach of, here are the resources we have, here are the areas that they're focused on. How do we ensure the success of those top priorities, but continue to invest in other areas that we believe are very important for the future? And then just get feedback on that. I think the transparency piece there is huge.
Great. Well, I want to wrap up by asking a few questions that we ask all of our guests. And the first one is, what do you think makes a great product?
Yeah, to me, what makes a great product is the use case and the value to the user is clear. That it's completely obvious, why does this exist? That's first and foremost. And I think the other thing that really comes to mind is a great product builds trust with the user by delivering on, that important value today of why this exists, why you care, but then also builds the foundation and expectation for how that value will grow over time. So give the user some line of sight to how this product is going to grow with them, and give hints at that value that is going to come, be it either a deepening of the relationship or other aspects of their needs that you plan to take on. So by the time that you bring those to market and start, be it an MVP or start iterating, that they're already primed to expect that from your product, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And what do you think makes a great product manager?
Yeah. So I would say there's four things specifically that, I look for in PMs and in working with my team, I believe have really led to success and great PMs. Is first, being really strong problem solvers. It's not about being a feature builder. It's about being a problem solver and being fully accountable for understanding the problem and sharing that context with the broader team and relentlessly steering solutions back to the problem being solved. So I think that is probably number one. Next up would be having strong opinions that are loosely held and actively seeking out new information to refine that understanding. So, my expectation is that PMs are responsible for being experts in their problem areas and having conviction in their opinions, but they absolutely should welcome new data, new experiment outcomes, fresh perspectives, and others' input, and be flexible in changing strategy in response to the new inputs. Like ultimately, the focus should be on finding the truth over being right, which I think is something that, takes time and maturity to really recognize, but it absolutely leads to better outcomes. Third would be really keeping the end state in mind as you're working towards a problem solution. So really design and ideate for the ideal state of where you want to be, and then work backwards. And in working backwards, embracing progress over perfection. Like you have to be pragmatic about what you're going to do today and what you're going to, allow to be done later, as opposed to front loading everything, and really being conscious of what are reversible and irreversible decisions when making those trade-offs of what to build when. And then the final one is just obsessing over your users. Product managers should amplify the voices of their users and really be in constant pursuit of understanding them and their needs more completely. Leveraging data for insights is critical, but also recognizing that users are much more than numbers and never losing sight of that as well.
And some of those attributes I think would be easier or harder to look for when you're interviewing product managers. How do you look to understand whether people you're interviewing have those attributes that you value?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, some of it comes down to asking for specific examples of when they have done certain things. So for example, tell me about a specific time when you advocated for making a larger investment than what was originally in scope. Why? How did you make that case? Like, how did it play out? And really seeing how they think about problem solving, incorporating others' feedback, and actually bringing people along. And again, making those trade-offs for short-term, long-term. So that's one example, but it is hard, but I think, you can get very specific of outlining questions that to the best that you can will try to assess how different PM candidates kind of skew on these different axes and areas where you can identify where they may need some additional coaching.
That makes sense. And what advice do you have for any product managers listening who aspire to someday have a similar leadership role as yours?
Yeah, I think it's all about thinking about, what you want to learn and in what order. There's a lot of ways that your career can go. There's a lot of different ways to get exposure to different things. And realistically, you can't optimize for all of those at the same time. So be really targeted about what you want to learn and prioritize your experiences accordingly. I think also what's critical to remember is that either way, you have to learn the fundamentals and do the foundational work at some point. There will always be an eat your broccoli stage in your career, and that's okay. You should embrace it and learn from it. Even if it's not your favorite thing to be doing at that exact moment, there's so much value there. And I also think just recognizing that depending on what point you're at in your career, the frustrating times are likely going to be the times that you learn the most from. Those will be the foundational experiences for you as a leader. And so from whenever you're in one of those frustrating experiences where either you don't like the way the team is being led or you're not set up for success, et cetera, those are the things that you'll take with you when you're in a position as a leader to steer clear of creating those situations for your team, right? And so you'll find those things that you want to replicate in your future and that you really want to bring forward with you, but also the things that you're going to hold yourself accountable to never, really letting be a situation in your future team. So really don't lose sight of the value of the more painful parts of your trajectory because they really, really do matter.
And finally, would love to hear if there's any influencers, books, blogs, newsletters that you read and find particularly helpful.
Yeah, for sure. On the book side, I really enjoy books around leadership because I think regardless of, where you're at in your career, a PM's role is central in leading a team, and that's the scope and size of that team will grow over time. But some of the books that really stand out to me, the first one is Turn the Ship Around. That's about empowering people to be leaders and make decisions by giving them sufficient context and aligning on goals and outcomes. And this really can resonate with product people of all levels, given the importance of orienting around problems and not solutions and how you actually set up others to be able to think that way and have an impact. And then Team of Teams is another one, which really expands this concept with more focus on how you set up teams beyond just individuals to really be empowered to run after goals and have an impact. So those are two that I really love. On the newsletters, from a healthcare standpoint, I find Bloomberg Prognosis and Axios Vitals to be really good. And newsletters, influencers, I have to give a plug for my friend Packy McCormick and his newsletter, Not Boring. It's a really fresh take on business models and startups and the technology world that is one incredibly compelling and interesting to read, but also really insightful. So I would also recommend that one.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, thank you, Jess. Really appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. My pleasure.
If you like what you heard today, please subscribe to our podcast, Product Talk, and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to podcasts. Products That Count is so much more than a podcast. Visit www.productsthatcount.com to join the community of over 200,000 product managers. You'll find events with inspiring speakers, articles packed with insights, and make meaningful connections with amazing product people like you. That's www.productsthatcount.com. See you there.
Thank you, and if you liked what you heard, please leave us a review on iTunes.